Hello, good evening, and welcome to the episode 18 of Montague Island Books. Now, our guest today has got a very long biography, but a very interesting one. And the author today, in his biography, said you could say that writing was clearly on the wall for someone born in a library, that they might aspire to be an author. But to get to that point, our guest tonight has travelled a circuitous route. I can never say that word, circuitous route. And he worked in education for many years, even teaching for a period in Cairo before he started writing. And that was a challenge he'd long to tackle for more years than he cares to remember. He's written a number of successful short stories, has 10 books available in the crime series based around Harrogate. He was born in Bradford and spent 3 years at Ripon College. He's never lost his love for his own county, but he now lives in Lancashire. He has a passion that is reflected in the settings for all his DCI Bennett novels. However, as well as this series, it says he's writing a new series set in Merseyside, but he's actually just released the second book, which you will hear all about later. He's enjoyed many hobbies, including collecting works by Northern artists. The art auctions offer a degree of excitement when both buying and certainly when selling. And it's an hobby he has bestowed upon DCI Cyril Bennett, the main character in his successful Bennett series. So welcome everyone to Malcolm Hollingdrake. Thanks for coming along tonight, Malcolm.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Great to have you. So do you want to expand on the little bio? I think I've got the biography off your website or off Amazon.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand a little on that and tell us a bit more about that, about you and about your books?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, born in Bradford, as I say, in a library, but a very different library. It was a penny library that was owned by my grandmother. Pre-war and during the war, people could go in there and borrow books for a set price, and then when they took them back, they got their deposit back, and they bought more. So the newer the book, the more expensive it was to actually borrow. And when Mum and Dad were looking for a house, we stayed in the library itself, in the flat above, and so that's where I was born. I wasn't actually born in a public library. Between the aisles of science fiction and murder, I was actually in this one. And then from there, spent most of my time in education in Bradford. Went to the same primary school as David Hockney, strangely enough. He lived just around the corner. And then when it came to college time, I went up to Ripon, and it was in the first weekend I met Debbie at the college, and that's one of the reasons why I'm over in Lancashire and not in Yorkshire. We had a 4-year plan that we would come to Lancashire for 4 years and then go back to Yorkshire, but the missionary work has taken longer than I anticipated. To bring the heathen hordes into some sort of line, but we're looking to go back to Yorkshire, but the times aren't right at the moment, are they? So we'll wait. But teaching abroad as well. So I taught predominantly in Lancashire, and then we had the opportunity to go teaching. Debbie taught in Corfu, and then I had the opportunity to go with Deb, a friend that she met in Corfu, started teaching in Cairo, and they asked if I would go out and give them some guidance on the primary school setup there, because it was an English medium school. So we did that, and they then said, would I like to apply for the job of head of senior teacher for this 1,000-place school out by the pyramids? So we talked about it. I went to my authority. They gave me 2 years leave of absence from my job. Wow. And out we went, and it was quite an exciting time whilst we were there. So yeah, it was great. Good. And we lived in a mud hut, really, on an estate called the Wissawassif estate, where they did their own weaving and pottery and glasswork, and so it suited me down to the ground, with it being quite an arty place.
Great.
And then just writing, and
just writing, he says.
Yeah, just writing it. And the first book I wrote was called Engulfed. And I tried to get that published and couldn't, and so I self-published that. And in some ways, it's a favourite book of mine. It's very close to my heart because it's in northern Cyprus, where I lived for quite some time. And then I started, I wanted to write a crime series, so I started the Harrogate series. And eventually, when I'd written the third one, I managed to get a publishing deal with Bloodhound. And they signed me then for 7 books, which we completed. And then we continued independently until we got to number 10, writing book number 11 at the minute. And I then wrote, whilst writing those, I wrote, I was actually commissioned to write a series featuring 2 female detectives. And that was the seed, and I didn't want to do it because I still felt there was more in the Harrogate. And then when I did start that, I got quite excited by it. So that was the Merseyside, and sent that to Holbeck, and I'm grateful that they decided to take it on. It's been a great experience working for Holbeck. It's been very nice. So how many more books inside? I don't know. If you'd have said to me, Joe, 5 years ago, you're going to write 2 books, 3 books, I would have said, there's no chance. But it's addictive. It's addictive, and the time flies when you're writing. It's the researching as well that I love very much.
I think a lot of authors are like that. They find the research side of it even more sort of interesting than the actual, writing in a lot of cases, because they can just sort of lose themselves in a way. Like we lose ourselves in the book, they can lose themselves in the research. That's
right. And if anybody looked at my search history, it's quite scary, to be honest. But there's an awful lot out there. There's an awful lot of falseness out there, falsehoods. But I'm lucky because I have a number of people I can contact, a pathologist, a coroner. And it's just good to have some clarifications. And now with Holbeck, we have a chemist and a scientist author with them, and he's gone through my books, and but for the last one anyway. And before it was published, and said, there's a couple of points you might want to make on that aren't truly accurate. One of which was ozone. When you used to say going to the seaside, you can feel the ozone. And he said if it had ozone, everybody would be dead. No Victorian and Edwardian myth, isn't it?
A social myth, isn't it?
Yes, but it's lovely, isn't it? And this sticks in your head, and you think, because you've grown up with it, you think it's right, and you don't actually check that, and that's where you should be checking. All those little things should be checked.
That's it. So do you want to just give us, first of all, give us a brief overview of the Harrogate series?
The Harrogate series is actually set in Harrogate, and set in a new police station that was built on the outskirts of Harrogate. And I decided to set my main detective, DCI Sewell Bennett, in the centre of Harrogate in Robert Street. And I chose Robert Street because it has this lovely ginnel which runs between West Park and Robert Street. I wanted to use North Yorkshire because I know it really well. With going there as a kid, my grandfather was born in Ramsgate, and so I knew the background of all of these places, and I knew it would make a superb backdrop to the books. And I could set different books in different places, so Richmond is featured and so on. Harrogate is a really, I don't know, it's a beautiful spa town. I wouldn't think there's a lot of crime going on, but there is. And like everywhere, it's there. There's an underbelly, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I'd read that the Harrogate was the happiest place in the UK to live, and so that's why I set it in Harrogate. And I couldn't find anybody else who set their books predominantly in Harrogate, so that was the reason why I chose it. And there's always something, and it's a great place to go and stay. And there's the Harrogate Crime Writers Festival, so it's a perfect venue.
Yeah.
So the architecture, the street settings, the Stray, of course, it changes. It just changes on you. So if you're writing a book set in spring, you've got a backdrop there, or if you're setting it in winter, it's a different place altogether. So it's fantastic.
And it's quite a touristy place as well, so you get a good change of people going through the sort of through the place as well, don't you?
Yeah, the conference facilities are massive, and so you have, although that's been taken over by the Nightingale, which is now gone. But you have all this influx of different people from different parts of the world, and also different geographical settings around the UK. So again, you've got a file of people that you can use. You can bring those in, but you've enough in Harrogate anyway to write. I think it's filled 10 books, and I like to think they're all 10 very different books. And book 11 is similar. It's trying to keep the storyline fresh. and it not being a reader, I've not been influenced by anybody else really. So it's what you get is me. You don't get anybody different. And I've never read sort of an Ian Rankin. I've never read a Lee Child. I've never read. So I've never been influenced. So the only guy I've read a lot of was Lee. Can't even remember his name now. Tom Neal is his name. Robert Ryan. So I've read all of his books, but that's all.
Yeah.
He's a very different writer of crime.
Yeah. So now tell us about the new series, about the Liverpool crime series.
The new series, well, that's set very close to where I live. So for one thing, I know it probably better now than I know Harrogate. And of course, again, Liverpool is a wonderful, well, I set it in the north of Liverpool because it's split into 3 areas as Liverpool Police, I think. And so I wanted to be in the northern end of the Sefton Coast. So that takes in so North Liverpool, Southport, and all in between. And I just find it a spectacular place to set the stories. Southport particularly is one of the most beautiful. I mean, it's a little bit run down now, and that's hard to, shouldn't really say that, but like all towns, it's suffered from the lack of probably investment, but also from the shops closing down, and the tourist trade isn't like it used to be, I feel sure. So it has that shabby chic part, which I rather like, and that's been an influence in the way that I write. But it's also got some jewels. It's kind of like the Atkinson Gallery in Southport, the Gallopers, the pier, the disappearing sea. History is also good to actually bring into your stories, and that's been vital. It's particularly when I wrote Sin.
Yeah.
So the first one is set predominantly in Liverpool, and the second one is set around the Southport area, and the third one will be set between.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I'm interested in that because I used to live in Southport, so I know, well, all the Liverpool and Southport area. So I think when the author knows an area where he's writing a book, it's great. But when you as a reader know the area as well, it just adds an extra dimension. So
I think so. People often comment on that, Joe, that they can walk the same street. I have people contact me and say, "Where's the black door in Harrogate?" Which is the door of Morfett's auction house. So they want to know where it is because it's sort of hidden in this facade of shops, and you have to direct them and say that. But it's lovely. It's lovely when people actually take the stories on board to such a degree that it's become not real, but they like to visit the places, and that's why I use real street names, real places if I can, and real restaurants and real shops. And I try and ask if I can have permission, but I don't really need the permission if I'm describing a building.
And when you get sick of writing, you can set up Malcolm Hollingdrake tours. Get your coach license and.
Well, they did that for Last of the Summer Wine, didn't they, at Holton Firth? It's been a real tourist attraction from those few stories.
Even with Mike Craven, there's a travel firm now that are doing Mike Craven tours.
Really?
Yeah.
And Louise Ross, of course, is the same, hasn't she? She's got quite a few in the Northumberland.
Yeah, so there's a chance for you. There's a place for you in the mark.
I'll be dead by then.
Well, thanks for telling us all about your book. So now would you like to tell us and introduce your guest for this evening?
Yes, thank you very much. My guest for this evening is Dee Grocock. I've known Dee since I first started writing, and I first met Dee in Harrogate in W.H. Smith's when I was doing the book signing, and she came all the way down. I think she came with Craig then, Dee, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I was with Georgia.
With Georgia, that's and you popped in to see me, and that was fabulous. And it was great meeting somebody who'd read all my books and liked them as well, which was an added bonus as well. And then from there, we've met a number of times. Dee will always come to events that I organise in Harrogate, and she's been tremendous support, and I'm grateful. And when I said to her, "Would you like to come on here?" I was just so pleased. She said yes, because I know Dee's read things.
Well, hello, Dee. It's lovely to have you here with us.
Thank you, Joe. Nice to be here.
So do you want to tell us, in your own words, what Malcolm's books are about?
Well, the Harrogate crime series for me, I think one of the main reasons that I really enjoyed them is because I lived in Harrogate for a while. So it was an area that I know well. And so I, as he says, you know, places like the Stray, I knew exactly where he was talking about. And the characters, he writes really good characters, and his descriptions, I just love the descriptive writing in his books as well. So I started off with those, and then of course the new series, I've already read both of those. In fact, I think I've read all his books that he's done to date, so I'm not quite stalking, but close enough.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you obviously enjoyed the book, so that's great. Now we've also got a couple of visitors attending with us this evening as well. We've got Donna and Bob. So Donna and Bob, feel free to shout in at any time with any questions you've got for Malcolm or for Dee. So what we'll do now is we'll go on to have a look at what books you've chosen. So for book number one, what's your choice going to be, Malcolm?
Book number one for me is the collection of short stories by Saki. And I think it was Debbie who introduced me to this series, and I love it because of the brevity of the shorts. The language is delightful, and the titles just are captivating. And Saki is quite an interesting H.H. Munro because he was actually killed by a sniper in the First World War. Asking somebody to put that bloody light out, as the moment he said that, he got shot in the head.
Wow.
But his work's lovely. And I've got one called Sredni Vashtar. And what captivated me about this particular book was the way that they start. And they just draw you in. And then he describes this kid who was only given 5 years to live by the doctor, has this wonderful exploration of this house and the garden. And in the garden is a shed. And in the shed is, he lets his imagination run wild. And he says here, he had peopled it with a legion of familiar phantoms, evoked partly from the fragments of history and partly from his own brain. But it also boasted 2 inmates of flesh and blood. In one corner lived a ragged plumaged hooded hen, on which he lavished the affection that he scarcely another outlet. Further back in the gloom stood a large hutch divided into 2 compartments, one of which was fronted with closed iron bars. This was the abode of a large polecat ferret, which a friendly butcher's boy had smuggled with cage and all into its present quarters in exchange for a long-secreted hoard of small silver. Conradin was dreadfully afraid of the lithe, sharp-fanged beast, but it was his most treasured possession. And that was Sredni Vashtar, and he tried to get rid of it, and he then decided it was a god, even though he feared it. And he would say, Sredni Vashtar went forth, his thoughts were thoughts, and his teeth were white. His enemies called for peace, but he brought them death. Sredni Vashtar, the beautiful. I just think the language
words. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And I've had those now for a long. I say there's 2 volumes.
So when was it, so if he was killed in the First World War, when was the story published?
These stories were published. Going back, I think they were published born in 1870 in Burma. Right. He died on the 14th of November 1916. So within that period, these copies are 1978. But I would recommend them to anybody who can get hold of them. They like sort of stories.
Brilliant. And now, Dee, what's your first book going to be?
Well, mine's a classic. It is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I couldn't not talk about that book. It's one that I had to do for school, and at the time I was sort of like, at school, I don't really want to read it. But once I started reading it, just fell in love with it. I love her writing. And I've also read the follow-up that took obviously a very long time to be released. Not many people seem to like that one, but I enjoyed both of them. And it's just interesting to read about the classes, all the racism, you know, and it's just one of those books that it's rare I read a book again, but it is one that I do read a lot. And watch the films, because it's Gregory Peck, it has to be done.
Yeah, and it's great when you got them special books that you can go back to, you know, 3, 4, 5 times or more, and still pick out little new bits in them as well. So yeah, great choice.
Exactly.
And I think we've had people pick that book before on the on this sort of series of programs. So it's a popular choice. Yeah. So what's your second book going to be, Malcolm?
The second book is by Frederick Forsyth, and it's called The Shepherd.
Right.
By the
So tell us
done by different authors. And it's about a short story about a guy flying home in 1957 in a vampire jet. And it's only a 60-minute flight. And then as he's coming over to Lakenheath, he has a problem. It becomes foggy, he loses his radio, he loses his instruments. But suddenly in the fog, he sees an old Mosquito aircraft. And it becomes the Shepherd, and it takes him down to land.
Right.
And the actual station he lands on is disused. And it's the older base belonging to the Shepherd, the pilot who died in the war. The Shepherd in back after. So it's just beautiful.
So I know you're into flying as well. So did you read that before you started flying, or and did that influence you, or did the book come later?
I think it was before. I'd always been taken for flight. When I was a child in Bradford, my mother worked for a company called W&R Baines, who were a toy and a cycle manufacturer. And he used to have his own planes. And if we passed any exams, he would take the brother and myself up for a flight from Bradford.
Right.
Bradford. And so I got the flying book from Mr. Baines. And then when we could, in about 83, I qualified as a pilot. But I think I'd had this one by then. So anything to do with flight, and you might see a reflection of that in here. And I know Bob's interested in flying as well. They just captivate me. Anything to do with flight captivate.
Great.
So if anybody's not read that, it's well worth it. Well worth it.
Yeah, super, great choice. And what's your second book going to be, Dee?
Mine is by an indie author called M.A. Comley, and it's called Cruel Justice. And it's part of a series, the D.I. Lorne Simpkins and her sidekick D.S.P. Childs. And she's written a lot of books in the series, but she is also a prolific writer. And if you like crime books, which I do, they're worth a read. You know, she's very good at covering topics that are being talked about all the time, you know, bringing them into the stories, like homelessness, bullying, you know, she brings it in and makes people stop and think actually about what's going on in the world and how it affects people as well.
Yeah, great.
And she's a very good indie author.
So would you call that more of a psychological thriller?
They're classed, I would probably say, yeah, sort of police procedural, psychological thrillers. She's got a lot of different series out that she writes. I don't know how she does it. every time you speak to her, she's written another one, and she's amazing.
That's great. So you both made two great choices for your first two choices. So we're now on to choice number 3 of the books you'd take to the island. So what's your next one, Malcolm?
The next one is Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
I was just thinking if I was doing that, would have been one of my 7 as well. So
fantastic. Again, it suits me down to the ground. As Debbie says as well, poetry. It's absolutely poetry about a seagull seeing something. And the back tells you everything. People who make their own rules when they know they're right. People who get a special pleasure out of doing something well, even if it's only for themselves. And people who know there's more to this whole living thing than meets the eye. They like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's about pushes himself into different lights, and it's just beautifully. And of course, Neil Diamond wrote a full album, and there was a film made.
Oh.
And the album is again well worth listening to. If you like Neil Diamond, it's a lot of it instrumental, but it's stunning. So it's 1 million copies were sold to that. Well done, but great little book.
Yeah,
Recommend. He then wrote a follow-up called The Gift of Wings, which is also very, very good.
Nice story behind that too. Yeah, that's brilliant. So Dee, what's your book number 3 going to be?
I couldn't come on here after being invited by Malcolm and not mention one of his books.
Go on,
Bridging the Gulf.
Which one have you chosen?
It's Bridging the Gulf. And I probably harassed poor Malcolm quite a bit in that it was on Kindle and I thought it should be in paperback, which eventually did happen. But it is such an emotive and thought-provoking book. It's about Roy Hanna, who's in the Gulf War, and he ended up with lots of PTSD from it, and he wasn't getting any support from the government. And I don't obviously want to tell everything about it, but I know it means that it's a book that means a lot to Malcolm, but it does to me too. And you can see the amount of research that had to go into it, all about PTSD, and obviously, struggling with it when you come back from the tour. And it's a book that I can read again and again. There are only 3 books. Harper Lee, there's another one that I'm bringing in later, and this one. They're the only ones that I've ever read more than once. And it's an amazing book. That
book, I'm sure it's that one, is actually on my TBR mountain, and it really is a mountain, because if I've got the book right, and Malcolm will hopefully put me right on this, but if I've got the book right, this actually not necessarily centres, but involves a very big bridge of the M6 at Gathurst. Is that the right one? Yeah.
That's the right one.
I've got that on my TBR pile because we used to, many, many years ago, I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, we used to have a boat on the canal at Appley Bridge in Lancashire. And we used to quite often travel up to Gathurst. And it is an amazing point because you've got this lock house and a lock. And it's you feel like you could be miles away from anywhere, but you've got this massive motorway bridge running over top across the valley. But because it's that high and because of the way they built it, you don't really get lots. You would think right under a motorway you get lots of noise, but you don't. And then also intersecting it is the railway. So you've got the motorway high up, then you've got the railway, and then you've got the canal. So you've got like 3 industrial ages. And it's just such a quiet spot, and it's only 3 or 4 miles outside of Wigan. But it's an amazing place, and so that's one of the reasons. One, because it's Malcolm's, but also because it's a place that I know well. So I like the way you've chosen that one for that.
It's interesting in research for that. I actually climbed all the way along underneath that on the girder to see how it could be done, and to feel the wind and to feel how high it was from here up there. But now they put a big fence around it. So whether they read my book and thought,
cost the government a fortune, Malcolm.
We need to bump that up your pile, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely need to. Yeah, but a great story behind that as well. So wonderful. So we're now on to book number 4. So what's your book number 4, Malcolm?
Sagittarius Rising. Cecil Lewis. It's just a story about the First World War fighter pilot, written absolutely beautifully. And again, another one I would thoroughly recommend, but it might not suit everybody. But again, one that I picked up by pure accident and one that I couldn't put down once I collected it. So thoroughly recommended. Wonderful, wonderful writer, wonderful writer.
Is it fiction or non-fiction?
It's non-fiction. You know, that's a very good question, because I sometimes wonder. I'm sure it's non-fiction, but I do think it's the way that it's written, that it's been expanded a little bit. And I think that's why I like Robert Ryan, because he picks historical elements and develops them. So you've got this mixture of fact and fiction blended in, but because he was a fighter pilot in the First World War, it just builds and builds, and it's stunning.
I've read a few books by, I don't know if you've ever read any of his books, Edward Rutherford. And he's written lots of they're all with big, hefty books. He's just got one out now on China. But I read one that he did on New York. And he took New York right from the early settlers, right through to 9/11.
Wow.
In one book, following different families. And he came up with a term of faction. So it's fiction based on fact.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's very, I found, I know I don't read a lot, but it's very entertaining because you don't know where the truth stops. And there's that lovely, a bit like seawater and fresh water, you get that bracket. It's like that, isn't it?
Yeah. And you also get the feeling that I've never been to New York, but I got the feeling that after reading the book, but I had, because but it wasn't just the story, it was the smells and the noise and everything. A bit like one of your fellow authors on your publishing, I can't just remember the name of his book, who set one in 1939 Singapore.
Oh, it's just come out now, hasn't it?
It's just come out, and that is another book that does the same thing with a lot of fact in it, but it is fiction. But it just transports you. But I can't think. Whiteman. Can't think of his first name. It'll come to me.
It's due out soon, isn't it? Is it due out in?
Yeah, I read an advanced reader copy of it through Hobeck.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is. It's due out very soon. And it's got a lovely front cover as well. But again, that was very much faction, and you sort of felt like you were living it, and like that was back in 1939, so
Fabulous.
Great.
Fabulous.
So brilliant choice on that one. And Dee, what's your book number 4?
Hey, this is another, was an indie author who's just been taken up by Spellbound Publishers, and it's called Unknown by Phil Price. It's a fantasy horror book, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big baby. I don't do vampires, monsters, anything like that, because I have nightmares. But I decided to be brave and read well and truly outside of my comfort zone, and I just couldn't put it down. It's just one of those books that didn't matter if I was having, one of my insomnia nights, it was going to get read, whatever happened. And it's changed me a bit in that I will read a bit more scary than what I would before.
And what made you pick that up in the first place? If it was a genre that you're not really, that you didn't really feel comfortable with, what made you pick it up?
Because I'd read a book of his called Ashes of Innocence, which is a psychological thriller. And I really enjoyed it. And it was the only one at that point that he'd done. And so I thought, I'm going to try, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to give it a go. And I think I haven't got very far. I've read the first one. I think there's about another 3 in the series, but they all follow on.
You've made a start.
I've made a start. I'm not saying it's not going to take me a while, but I've started.
Yeah, that's it. That's the main thing, isn't it? You've made a start. That's great.
Yeah.
So now we're on to book number 5. So what have you got for us, Malcolm?
A Race with Love and Death. And it's a story of Richard Seaman, Dick Seaman, who was probably one of our greatest motor racing drivers. But unfortunately, he was born into a very wealthy family. His mother used to buy him racing cars for him to drive. His father was very much against it. And he got the offer to race for Mercedes-Benz like Lewis Hamilton.
Wow.
In the 1930s. And of course, what was happening in Germany in the 1930s, he had to go and live over there. And that caused a rift in the family. He also then married the 18-year-old daughter of the founders of BMW. So he stayed there, but then he couldn't bring money out. And so the family was split, and he had a serious problem whether to carry on living over there or come back to the UK. His mother carried on funding as well. And in the end, sadly, he died at Spa racing. And I think he was 26 at the time. And Hitler sent him a huge wreath when he was buried in UK at the time. But again, really nicely put together.
Yeah, it sounds it, yeah.
And liked it very much.
Yeah, because it's something you don't really hear a great deal about pre-war, motor racing.
No, and a very dangerous game it was too.
Yeah,
and as I say, he was an outstanding driver for his time.
Yeah.
But without the wealth of his family, it probably wouldn't have happened. And without the war, you never know what might have happened.
Well,
it split the family completely as far with his father. But yeah, good.
Interesting book. Great. So what's your book number 5, Dee?
Mine is a true story by Jeremy Dronfield. It's The Boy Who Followed His Father into Auschwitz. It's a very difficult read. I had to keep putting it aside, having a very good cry and reading something else and then going back to it. But it's really good. You obviously read about things that were going on in Auschwitz and what it was really like there. And it touched me. It really did. It's a book that I feel should be taught for GCSE at schools, so that what went on in the camps it will never be forgotten.
Yeah,
because it does seem, nowadays that the history just isn't being taught in the way it was when we were all younger. So it would be lovely to see it on the curriculum. I'm not sure it will, but it really is worth a read. And knowing that what you're reading is true, and not just a made-up story, does make it a bit more special as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it makes it a bit deeper. It's sort of emotionally as well, doesn't it? So, but
definitely.
I imagine that's probably a book you wouldn't read again. I think once you got through it, that would be
No, I don't think I ever could.
Certainly stick in the mind.
Yes.
That's it. So what's now we're on to book number 6. So what's your number 6 going to be?
Robert Ryan, the guy that I've followed his books, and this is the Dead Man's Land, which features Dr. Watson from Sherlock Holmes. When he's estranged from Sherlock Holmes, he goes to serve his country in the medical profession on the First World War, the Somme. And amongst all the carnage, they find a body with strange wounds, and they realise it's a murderer. So he sets the task of trying to find out, and the body count piles up, and eventually he solves it. And it's actually written, Dead Man's Land is fully authorised by the Conan Doyle estate. So it's, again, that mixture of reality, but all three elements, really. He's just bringing in a historical literary figure into this historical First World War.
But it's interesting because when we were talking about faction, which it is, you've in a way brought it into your books as well, because you use all set places, that exist, and sort of modern issues, and of things that not fanciful, but they could actually happen.
I think that's right, and I think that's probably the influence of the Robert Ryan books that I've read. And as I say, that he was the only author that when he got a new book out, I was eager to go and get the next one and read it. And he's written a few. He's written Death on the Ice, and he wrote one about Africa. And he's a great author, but you don't see very many of his books again. But I would recommend those very much.
Right, wonderful. And what's your book number 6 going to be, Dee?
Mine is John Steinbeck, of Mice and Men.
Oh,
And it's another favourite
yeah.
way
Another
back
big
from
book.
school days.
Yeah.
It's a short read, so it doesn't take long to sit and flick through it.
Short read, but a big book, isn't it? It's one of them.
Yeah, I thought I'd find something really small compared to all the others. It's just a good read, isn't it? It's sad, and it's he writes really well about the time that the depression in the 30s, and he writes it really well.
And if Malcolm doesn't make a canoe in time, then you can read it again. So that's great. So what we're now on to the final book 7. So what's your last book, Malcolm?
The best still last, really, in a way. I read about this book in The Spectator. Got a great review. It's David Hockney's Spring Cannot Be Cancelled, and it's a full year of Hockney living in Normandy during lockdown. Wow. And every day he produces electronic drawings. He was fascinated by the Bale Tapestry, and it's a link of that, but it's looking at nature that surrounds him. So some of his pictures, you can't, like this one here, are all done on an iPad. And absolutely wonderful. And of course, he was doing his huge paintings in the Yorkshire Wolds, and a great read. And Hockney, to me, is a hero because he says it as it is. And you either like his work or you don't. But a Bradford boy, made good, great book.
And it's one of those books that, considering it was in lockdown when people would have been more sort of interested in that, I haven't, until you mentioned it, and I've not heard of it before, where you would think that because it was something that was made in lockdown, you would probably have heard more about. But
I think it's such a specialist book, Joe, that and again, it would be probably only the art people who really want to read that. But just the way that he actually is 82 or 85 now, isn't he? Wow. He's still adapting to modern technology to create artistic pieces. And of course, with that, even if he's isolated in Normandy, his agent in London can receive them straight away. Bang, And, really, really clever man. I mean, he did his fax pictures, didn't he? And he's putting photographs together. But that is just tremendous skill. Future
of art. Now, I know you're really into your art, and as we said earlier, you like the auctions. Explain to us what are the pictures behind you? They look very interesting.
These pictures behind me are by an artist called John Thompson, who lived in Greenfield in Lancashire, and he was a window dresser, and he did stage scenery, and he only became famous really late on in life, and he was picked up by a gallery owner called Bill Clark, and he drew pictures based on the queues, the food queues in America in the Depression, and so he called them the group series, and he numbered them. He didn't give them titles; he just numbered them. And the one at the bottom, I went to his studio, and sadly he's passed away now. But I went to the studio and I said to him, "Look, John, I could do the paint. I want to paint it." So he was talking, flat cap. He always wore a flat cap, and he talked in real broad like Lancashire, like what's one? And I said, I want to paint it, a picture. So after about an hour, he bent down and picked up this piece of paper off the floor, stuck it on this easel, got a felt tip pen, drew these figures in a queue, and said, "Just want black paint around it." I said, "Well, that'll be nice, yes, black paint. Just want any blue?" I said, "No, that's fine." He signed it, and he signed it. What a surprise. And I said, "Oh, that's lovely." He said, "Now then, what will they give me for that?" "I don't know, John, what do you want?" He said, "Give me 100 quid. Now, I've just seen him do this in 4 minutes off a scrap piece of paper. I said, "I haven't got 100, I've got £90 with me." I like 9, I'll have it. So when I took it for framing, the guy who framed it framed the others. And he said, "Where did you get that?" I said, "John Thompson." He said, "Can I ask how you pay for it?" I said, 90 quid. He said, "You know, he would have charged you 850 quid for that if you'd have gone to the gallery." So I was pleased.
Yeah.
He was a lovely artist, lovely. And his pet saying was, "Did they like him then?" That's what he always asked people his pictures.
Great, wonderful, and great story behind that as well. So that's all your 7 books done now. So Dee, what's your final book going to be?
My last one, I'm going back to childhood days. It's James and the Giant Peach. This was just my all-time favourite as a child. I always had my head in a book anyway, but that one I just read all the time. Just loved it, the magic of the story. You know, he certainly had a way of telling stories. And it's my favourite, my absolute favourite of his.
Kind of book you can read again and again.
Yeah. It's just one, a fan favourite that just doesn't ever go out of fashion either, does it? You know?
That's right. It'll always be there, and a great book to end the book selections with as well. So that's wonderful. So now we get on to the other items that you're taking along to the island. Now, when you get on the island, there is a Kindle with an imaginary set of all of Mike Craven's books, because for people that are listening for the first time today, Montague Island is an imaginary island off the coast of Cumbria that was devised or invented, however you want to put it, by Mike Craven for one of his books. And when I was thinking about doing this kind of a show, I was thinking desert island this style, but I thought, can't call it that. And so that's when I sort of thought about the Montague Island. So that's where that comes in. Now, we believe that on our fictitious island, there's about 1 hour of electricity every day, and that's all you get. But we're allowing you to take a CD. Now, the CD could be music, it could be a recording, an audio recording of a book, or whatever else you might think of for a CD. So, what is your CD going to be, Malcolm?
This was very difficult, because there is one track of a CD that I would love to take, and that was Witch Queen of New Orleans, because it was the first piece of music I danced with Deb to. So I decided that I would take Thin Lizzy, the best of, because we need to be able to feel better and feel brighter, and there's nobody who can rock like the Lizzy, is there? So.
And you've got the best of as well, so you've got a bit of every sort of era. So that's great. Good choice. Good choice. And what's yours going to be, Dee?
Mine would be Quadrophenia by The Who. Big Who fan, and that I can remember as a child going to my best friend's house, and her dad would have it on all the time. That or Pink Floyd. It was always one of the two. And ever since listening to that, they're just a band that I love, and the Quadrophenia album is just brilliant.
That album must have sold a few million in its time, as well as the film and everything else that's come of it. So
exactly.
Great choice, and it's one that will bring back a lot of memories when you're playing it on the island as well. So another great choice. So next we've got, as I say, bearing in mind that you've only got 1 hour of electricity a day, but you're allowed to take a DVD with you. Now, this again can be music, it can be a TV series, it can be a live music concert, or whatever you can get on DVD. So, what's your choice for DVD going to be, Malcolm?
Field of Dreams.
Great.
I think it actually captivates what we're all trying to do. We all have these inner thoughts and inner feelings, and we try to follow them as much as we can. And this chappie did, and brought them there. And I just think it's so emotional at the end. They come through the core. It's beautifully done. Great acting. I could watch that a number of times and fed up with it.
It's one of them films that you could watch every year it comes on. You could watch it. It's what it's like.
Very special film. Very clever film.
Great, wonderful. And what's yours going to be, Dee?
Mine would be a series, be cheating a bit, but it would be Father Ted. I do love humour. And I'd just have to have some humour on the island.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And nobody makes me laugh like Dermot does, where, just see him and I start laughing.
Yeah, good choice. And as you say, no matter how bad the weather is, the Cumbria weather, or how badly you're feeling, if you put that on for an hour, you know you're going to end up smiling, don't you?
Exactly.
So, you know,
and that's what you need.
Yeah, definitely what you need. Now, the next item you're allowed to take is a bit of an imaginary item, in that it can be any food or favourite meal, or, you know, it doesn't just have to be one ingredient, or it can be. It's up to you. So what food would you take, Malcolm?
It would have to be a plate of Yorkshire puddings with onion gravy made by the hand of my dear wife, who had to earn a certificate when she married me from my father. And she had to make Yorkshire puddings for him, and made her a certificate to say that. So Debbie's Yorkshire puddings would be the answer to that.
Has she still got the certificate?
She still has a certificate, yes. And she still has the skill. The Yorkshire puddings are wonderful. And we always have them at the beginning of a meal. We always have them as a starter, separate from the rest of the meal. And the truth of that is, of course, if you fill people up with Yorkshire puddings, they don't eat as much meat. But all Yorkshire, you know, again.
Yeah. I like the style of that one. And what about you, Dee? What are you taking as a food?
It's a bit of a strange one, because I am originally a southern girl, but I've lived up north for 20 odd years, and I've developed quite a liking for cheesy chips and gravy.
Oh,
so
cheesy chips and gravy.
And gravy. Yeah. It well, even when I first moved here, and I was like, no, why would you do that? It's really tasty.
Chips and gravy.
Cheesy chips and gravy.
I can't even get my head around, because when I was a child centuries ago, you never had cheesy chips. It's only really a thing, I don't know, is it 20, 30 years maybe? And I still can't get my head around cheesy chips, but cheesy chips and gravy.
I promise you, it tastes nicer than what it sounds. If I still lived down south, nobody would have a clue. It's just not something that we ever had. But up here, it's always on the menu.
Well, it's good to have something different. That's what this show's all about, just showing different choices and what people would take. So that's great to have that choice.
Well, I'll share my Yorkshire puddings with Dee. She shares her cheesy chips and gravy.
Definitely.
All right.
To say that we do know what cheesy chips and gravy are. And I love it.
Now, before we started tonight, I was chatting to Malcolm, and Malcolm's added an extra item to take to the island. He managed to, put my arm up my back, and I'm going to let him take an extra item. This is putting poor Dee on the spot, because she's not heard about this.
Thanks for the warning.
Blame Malcolm. But Malcolm said her about adding a painting. So go on, Malcolm, what painting have you chosen?
Well, I'm taking, obviously with David Hockney, I'm taking this painting, and it's of Bolton Junction in Bradford, painted in, I think, 1957. When he was very young, I think he was at Bradford Art School at the time. And Bolton Junction, one of the houses here, if I can point it here, was where my grandmother's library, Penny Library. And I used to play around here as a kid all the time. There used to be a quarry just to the left. And I've always been captivated. And that picture is actually in the Cartwright Hall in Bradford. So if I could take that, or a facsimile of it, I'd have it on the cave wall, providing Dee liked it as well. So. Great.
Now, Dee, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but do you have a favourite painting?
I do, and if I'd have known, I would have taken it off my wall. But I used to live in North Yorkshire before we came up to Northumberland, and there's an artist there called Mackenzie Thorpe, and he does, in some of his paintings, the skies are just fabulous. I've got a thing about skies. It's really strange, but if you show me a picture of a good sky, I'm happy. And he does some lovely paintings with some good skies. And I've got 3 of his paintings. I say he's from Richmond in North Yorkshire, and he's still there doing his paintings. And so yes, I would take them if I was allowed.
Great, yes, you're allowed on this special edition painting special. But interesting. So finally, we have the luxury item. So, and this really is as mad and as big or as small as you want to make it. So what is yours going to be, Malcolm?
Well, mine was actually invented by a man called Donald Bailey. So that giving you a clue. No, okay. It was one of the 4 items that managed to end the Second World War more quickly than it would have been. And it's put together in pieces.
Was it Spitfire?
No.
No.
It was the Bailey Bridge. And you put it together, send it across. And I thought, if I'm on an island, I can actually send the Bailey Bridge across, and then he and I can nip across the pub and then come back and then bring the Bailey Bridge,
back.
That sounds good.
That sounds like an ideal situation, that, doesn't it? But when you look at the storms we get in Cumbria, it might be a bit trickier. Off the coast of Cumbria. But, yeah, I like the planning. Good plan. And what about you, Dee? What's your luxury item going to be?
This was really hard. Everything else was really easy tonight. And again, I've changed this so many times, but I would take my armchair. As long as I've got a book, I can sit, I can watch the DVDs and listen to the music and be comfortable.
And feel like a part of home is with you.
Yes.
Great. It is. It's a good one. Yeah, your own comfy armchair. Yeah, can't beat that. So brilliant. Well, thank you both so much for going through all your choices. So I would now like to ask Donna and Bob if they've got any questions they want to put to you about either the choices or about the choices you've chosen to take to the island, or just general questions.
Donna, ladies first.
Go on.
No, I've spoke to Malcolm loads, so I think I know most that there is to know about Malcolm. So a woman after my own heart. I knew we were friends for a reason. We have similar tastes.
Definitely. So go on, Bob, what's your question?
I've just while you've been talking, just to both of you, to Dee, can I call you Dee? This says Deanne on the screen. You're comfortable with that, yeah? Just jotted down a few little things. And if you've heard of these, I don't know if to teach me proverbial to suck eggs, but I sort of mentioned this because I thought they might actually fit in. I'm guessing, with your interest in American novels, you've done The Catcher in the Rye and Catch-22, a sort of bog standard stuff. Have you come across Confederacy of Dunces yet?
No.
You might, if you like sort of American novels, it might be the sort of thing up your street. It isn't. It's not political. It doesn't aim to sort of change society or the way you think. It's a sort of semi-comedy novel, really, about a guy who's just inevitably hopeless, and we sort of follow over sort of several sort of episodes of his life, just his continuing hopelessness and failure in a very, very comic way. One of the strange things about the novel, it's sad, but it's kind of a little bit of an inspiration for him as an author or trying to be. The guy who wrote it, if I remember correctly, it didn't take off as a major success, and I think the poor sod actually killed himself because he was so disappointed that his book sales never took off. Oh. And then about a year after he'd done that, the market just exploded, and it was like the #1 bestseller in America for years. Wow. So there's
typical.
The message in the story.
A little bit of a lesson there for authors. Just hang on another year; it might come back.
In a drastic way, is it? So.
There's another one you might enjoy. Just talk about your sort of teasing your way into sort of horror and things like that. There's a lovely one that I've got. I've got a copy here on my bookcase called Kaneki the Ghost Finder. Oh. It's actually quite nice. It's sort of written in the sort of earlier part of the 20th century. I think, again, Malcolm, you might quite enjoy the author. I think he was also a soldier in the First World War or something like that, and ended up getting shot or something horrible happened to him. But in between all of that, he wrote this novel about basically a private ghost hunt based down in London in the sort of the early 1900s. And the book is several chapters of how he brings his friends around and regales them with tales of where he's been and what ghost he's been. And sometimes in the chapter it is a ghost, and sometimes it all turns out to be a hoax, somebody trying to do something nefarious. And it's always left until the last minute for him to actually reveal which of the two it actually is. And it's just a quaint little thing, part scary, but part sort of curiosity as well.
Sounds quite good, actually.
Sounds interesting.
And the other one, when you mentioned sort of books from your childhood, and I'm just thinking about the one you chose. If you ever looked at the Phantom Toll Booth at all,
Yes.
That's one of you, which is, I think, is just a good all-round cracking children's novel, really. Well, I thought I'd give that a mention. And a couple for you, Malcolm. There was, I don't know if you come across a book called Talk Down.
Yes, I have.
You have, by Brian Lacombe.
Yeah, he was he used to write quite a number of guides for flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually met him a few times. He did a bit of stunt piloting as well.
That's right, he did. He did. In fact,
quite an all-round guy.
Barton Air Show, I think he used to turn up at Barton. And did he fly as Pitts?
He did, yeah.
He did, yeah.
And he used to do this actor. Two people used to hold a ribbon across the runway, and used to come down and cut the ribbon with the leading edge of his wing.
Brilliant.
I remember I was chatting to him over a beer, and I said, "God, that looks so dangerous." He says, "Too right it is. I wouldn't want to be one of them people holding the ribbon." And there's another author called, I think his name's Stan Robinson, and he writes books about Spitfire and Hurricane squadrons in the Second World War, and they're quite good. I can't say whether they're real. I've never been a Hurricane pilot in the Second World War, but they sort of have that sort of air of authenticity about them, as if little details that pilots would know.
You're a musician, aren't you, Bob? Did you know that Gary Newman used to be a exhibition pilot?
I do, and I got something through the post today. Hang on a sec. Have a look at this.
You got a new album?
I think Gary Newman's wonderful. I really do.
Just got a new album. I just watching a video. There it is.
Signed by the man himself.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The book from Gary Newman. There you go.
Well, it was funny because I was at an air show where Gary Newman was flying his Harvard looking like a zero.
Yeah.
And climbed out looking like a normal human being, and all along the edge were these spectators all dressed as Gary Newman stage. It was quite bizarre seeing about 20 and he's not looking normal coming out in his flying suit. But yeah, good.
Brilliant.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Bob. Thanks for telling us about them. Not just books, but stories within stories about the books. So that's great. So just finally, Malcolm, do you want to tell us, just give everyone a recap about your books, also where they can get the books, what sort of formats, as in your audio books and what have you've got out, and also where people can contact you as regards social media and website, and if you go into any of the festivals this year where they can get signed books.
Yeah. First one is, to start at the beginning, is Bridging the Gulf, which used to be called Engulfed, and then the 10 in the Harrogate series. I then have a collection of short stories out, including one of my favourites, which was The Penultimate Man. And then I have the 2 new ones, published through Holbeck Books. They can be bought from Amazon in Kindle or paperback, and I think Holbeck are going to be doing the audio books for both of those. And the first 6 of the Harrogate series are available as audio books too. Hopefully the others will catch up at some stage, but audiobook is a little bit slow at the minute, so we'll see. I'm going to the Harrogate Crime Writers Festival. That's already booked in. I'm looking forward to that. So if anybody pops along there, I'd be happy to have some books with me. But everything else has closed down. Normally I organise 2 noir events every year, one in Harrogate Library and one in Wigan. This would have been the 4th, but we had to cancel that. Those have been really successful and sellouts, and I've been thrilled with that. And I've had a lot of support. Mike Craven came down to the last one we did, Paul Finch often is, well, he's there every year, another Wigan writer. And you can find me on www.malcolmhollingdrakeauthor.co.uk and Facebook and Twitter. So if anybody wants to make contact, please do.
Wonderful. So just one last time, Donna, Bob, any questions? And have you got anything you'd like to end on, Dee?
No, I don't think so.
That's great. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope you've got your bags packed ready for your trip to the island. And you know, I think Malcolm's been watching all the YouTube videos on how to make a canoe all week, but
I've been struggling to make a fire all week. Yes.
Yeah, but have a great time. Many thanks for joining us. Just to let people know that this will be, once it goes off, because it'll just cut off when I finish tonight, and then it'll start to save, and I'll upload it to social media and to YouTube tomorrow. And coming up next week, we've got Sarah Moorhead on the 3rd of June, and then we've got Adam Lofthouse on the 10th of June, and Alex Kane on the 17th of June. So that's the next 3, but we're pretty much booked up till the end of July. But many thanks for joining us, and we will see you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks very much, Conor.
See you all.